Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Kellam, and welcome to this week's edition of Encounter. A few years ago, the then Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, was seen in public with what appeared to be a pretty serious bruise on his forehead. And the commentators that night on the news were talking about why they didn't receive any word of the injury, and gosh, it looks really serious, it's really quite purple. Well, it turned out that someone heard in their little earpiece from someone who said, "It's Ash Wednesday," and Joe Biden is Roman Catholic, he's been to church, he has the ashes of Ash Wednesday on his forehead. I can't fault those commentators who were ignorant of the day, because when I grew up in Endicott, working at the Union Pharmacy as a kid, someone came in with ashes on their forehead on Ash Wednesday, and we Presbyterians were not very liturgical back then, and I offered them a Kleenex to wipe it off, and then realized this was a part of their religious tradition. This coming Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. It is the beginning of that 40-day period in the liturgical Christian calendar called Lent. Again, I didn't grow up with Lent, except from my Roman Catholic friends who would ask me what I was giving up for Lent. Important things like gum. And so as the Presbyterians in my tradition began to discover that there was value in these passages in the liturgical calendar year by year, I've become now a big fan of Lent. And that's odd because there aren't Lenten cards that you send out. It's a time of quiet, introspection, penitence, disciplines that we'll talk a little bit about. My guest today is Mother Elizabeth Ewing, and you are the Rector of Christ Episcopal Church in downtown Binghamton.
That's right.
And I'm going to call you Elizabeth because
that sounds just fine.
We're among friends, and you can call me Reverend Kellam. Just call me Jeff. And I discovered that you've not always been an Episcopalian, so the Ash Wednesday was not very important to you growing up as a Baptist.
No, it was not. We didn't really do it. I grew up American Baptist, though, in St. Louis, Missouri, so in a way like you, in an area with Roman Catholics and with Catholic friends. So I was aware that it happened, and I was aware about giving up things for Lent, which tended toward, yes, gum, chocolate, or in the case of a young teenage girl, were you going to give up lipstick?
Oh, man.
And so, this could be a real issue.
Yeah, I was thinking more Coca-Cola or something.
Something like that. No, right. Well, when you're a teenage girl, that could be an issue. But I I sang a lot, and so I sang masses, different things when I was in chorus in high school. And this really, and I was drawn to the Middle Ages. So all of this made me really aware of a liturgical tradition in the Christian church as well. And when I went to the University of North Carolina, one of my close friends was Episcopalian. And so my first experience of Ash Wednesday was going over with a fellow student to Chapel of the Cross, which is on campus, and experiencing an Ash Wednesday service.
Yes.
And
did you receive
and
ashes?
I received ashes, and I realized that was actually for me very deeply meaningful and a sign of entering into this 40 days of a different discipline, I should say more introspection, another type of way of connecting with God during a 40 days, which is a special number of the 40 days Jesus was in the wilderness. The 40 years the Israelite people were in the wilderness. The other thing that actually links well with my American Baptist tradition is you were on, we don't take communion very often, maybe 4 times a year. One of them is actually on Maundy Thursday, the night that communion is instituted. And so that was our one liturgical thing. And I was supposed to come up that day and profess my faith in Jesus to be baptized. And I didn't. I really thought about it. But that day and the kind of period of introspection of Lent that leads us up to Maundy Thursday, I think that Maundy Thursday in my Baptist youth, deciding whether or not I was going to choose to be baptized, connected back to Lent. So having this longer period of preparation before decision was strong. And I had no idea that Lent even came about originally, because that's when adults who were going to make a decision about becoming Christian on Easter would spend that kind of introspection.
And that was kind of the purpose of Lent, was to prepare people for baptism.
Yes.
Which came on Easter Sunday.
Which came on Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was, yes, exactly.
And so now we think of Ash Wednesday as the beginning of this 40-day period, and there are more than 40 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter.
That's
because we don't count those Sundays.
We don't count Sundays.
Because they're kind of like little Easters.
They are little Easters, yes. And if you're really, depending on how strict you want to be, if you give up chocolate, you potentially could eat a piece of chocolate.
Right.
Not in the spirit of the thing, but
no,
anyway.
Bite the head off the Easter bunny and be done with it.
Be done with it.
I remember the first time I received ashes as a Presbyterian, because again, we did not follow the liturgical calendar at that time. We were at the Montreat Youth Conference, which was a week-long conference, and each day was a different day in the Christian calendar. So we started with Advent, went on to Christmas, and each day, and then we got to Ash Wednesday, a particular day of the week there at the conference. And as the teenagers came in, and we're talking about 1,200 kids, we were offering them ashes. Wow. And some of the kids said, and their leaders said, no, that's a Catholic thing. We're not doing that. We're Presbyterians. We don't do that kind of hocus pocus stuff. But there were other people who were quite, it was the mark of the ashes of death as you prepare for the resurrection of new life on Easter. Right. And that 40-day period is so important for those in the liturgical traditions, but really for everybody, whether you follow this Lenten thing or not, to think that you might deepen your spirituality in some way during a period of time. And those are the disciplines.
So I will begin with kind of the focus of the discipline. So one is actually having that discipline to go and receive ashes and go through a service of penitence on Ash Wednesday is a way of acknowledging our mortality. So as you say, death, but it's basically coming before God and basically saying, oh yeah, most of the time we worry about being big deals. We worry about how we're perceived by other people and gaining all these worldly things. And wow, today, Ash Wednesday, we're going to come before you and say,
utter humility.
We are in utter humility. Yeah. We know we are human. We know you deeply love us, and that our only source of worthiness and life and love comes strongly from you, and it's available to everyone.
What do you say when you place the ashes?
We say, from dust you were made, and to dust you shall return.
Yeah.
So that and then I had a wonderful 7-year-old say to me, I wasn't made from dust. And so I said, well, would it work for you if I said, from organic material I was made, and to organic material I will return? And that worked decently enough. But it really is acknowledging, as much as we like to think that we control things, that we are incredibly important in a worldly way.
Yeah.
No, we come to God before humility because God is the source of all.
Yeah. And some churches now are offering, and of course, anyone can come into the church and receive the ashes during that service. But your church also, Christ Episcopal Church, and some others,
absolutely,
take them to the street. Now, what's that all about?
So that was, it's partly reminding people that, yes, we do this. It's Ash Wednesday, making it more available in a culture that is overall perhaps less aware of Ash Wednesday. And it's also offering it because it began in certain places where life was very busy. Mm-hmm. And people would say, well, I don't necessarily want to come to church at 7 in the morning, which is our first service, or at lunchtime at noon, or in that evening time, but I want to acknowledge early my mortality. So it's our way of also getting out and letting people know this is the season of Lent beginning, and offering to anyone the opportunity to say, yes, I want to acknowledge my humility and mortality.
Right.
We often hand out little prayer cards. We read Psalm 51. We also have a litany of penitence that confesses to God that we have thought too much of ourselves, that we have exploited other people, that we have been too worried about gaining luxury, and that we've done waste and pollution.
Yeah.
So we get out on the streets to let people know this is available and to make it available. And my experience with this has been one, it's been really wonderful. Many people are happy about it. Some people don't know what it is and whatever say no thank you. But we are not pushy. We just basically stand and wait. Is that people have come forward and been very grateful and have had, sometimes I will have a moment of prayer with them in the ashes to go, or they'll take the card. And other people, which I really love, especially last year, because Ash Wednesday moves around, as does Easter, and it was very early. And I had this wonderful experience of standing there at Metro Center and offering it to people, and they said, "Oh, is it Ash Wednesday already? I better go to St. Mary's at noon." So I think that it's partly allowing people who may want to keep that tradition to realize that it's there, and those who are unaware of it, just to have an option of another spiritual practice, or just as a human practice of remembering our mortality.
And it does take some interpretation, so that you're not just somebody walks up, you put the ashes on, they walk away. No. You want them to know what this is part of. And
we let them know what it's a part of, and that it's the beginning of this 40-day period of other potential spiritual practices that we start, and of really having that humility and acknowledging to God, we want to be in relationship with you. We have not really paid close enough attention to our relationship with God. And so the spiritual practices, many of them relate back to that, because some people will take on an extra period of prayer or scripture reading once a day or on an additional particular day a week. Even if they are regular churchgoers, they may want to take some personal time in prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's the daily office that certainly Episcopalians and some others have. I know it's a Presbyterian office that leads us into scripture readings. There are some wonderful particular devotional books and meditations that come out. So if you want to set aside time for reading those little insights in prayer each day. Yes. Yeah, and there are also these days in social media and with the internet. Absolutely.
You could Google Lenten devotionals or something, and you'll get a plethora, and a lot of them too.
Absolutely.
It's a daily thing that pops up on your cell phone or on your pad, and it leads you into maybe a biblical passage and then a story based on it or something. So that's one way to engage.
Absolutely.
We used to call these spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices, and the word discipline, of course, is related to discipleship, and we think of discipline as a punishment. But it's based in learning, isn't it?
It's based in learning, and I would always say it's a path to freedom. So my family is also very strong into athletics, and the feeling was that if you are, and as well as into church, and it carried both ways, if you are disciplined enough to do these exercises, then you have the freedom, you have the choice of how well you do, whereas if you don't, you don't do that. So yes, these are disciplines, a learning, a way of discipleship, a way of remembering God. So a lot of times the disciplines, say if you gave up chocolate, every time you crave chocolate, you might think, oh, that's right, I'm setting that aside now, and maybe I'll either say a short prayer, just know I set it aside. Other people, if they give something up that's of food, or they give up online shopping or various things, that sometimes they will then take the money and give that to a particular cause, either to the poor or somebody else, or something that is meaningful to them, that they will give extra. And so that's a kind of discipline, or the freedom of service, or they'll give extra time in service. To somebody to help, to either tutor with reading or help out at a food pantry or dinner. There are various ways. I have to say the other thing is that one year I gave up yelling at my children, and it was
everyone benefits.
And everyone benefits, and it was a kind of discipline and a learning and teaching there are ways of teaching and engaging my children that I can spend, as you say, this a bit more than 40 days without raising my voice to them.
Yeah.
And actually I preached that once, and embarrassingly, it's a humility moment, and there were many people with whom it resonated.
Yeah, I think the idea that we do this for 40 days, it doesn't hurt to go into that 45th day or that 300th day. That if you develop the habits and you find them spiritually enriching for you and for others whose lives you touch, what can be the bad part about that?
No, that's very true.
Our guest today is Mother Elizabeth Ewing, the Rector of Christ Episcopal Church in downtown Binghamton, and we're talking about Ash Wednesday, which is this coming Wednesday, but we're also talking about the spiritual disciplines of the next 40 days that follow. What will your church do now? Christ Episcopal Church will do what during Lent? What special things do you offer?
So we are adding an extra Holy Eucharist, or effectively a Mass service, on Saturdays at 5 p.m., and that will be followed at 6 p.m. by Stations of the Cross, because that is often another Lenten practice. We also have another Episcopal Church, St. Mark's, that will do that on Sunday. We invite different people in the congregation to do that because there are many ways of walking the stations. You can really just look at the whole path from Jesus's arrest through the crucifixion in a very straightforward way. You can look at modern parallels. You can have it more focused on Mary. You can do different ways. And so we are inviting different people, including on the 25th of March, our children of our parish, to do that. We are also doing a study, because this is one of those wonderful online things from the Society of St. John the Evangelist, Episcopal monks, but just wonderful, I say, across the board, that's called the 5 Marks of Love. And so that we will be looking at telling of God's love, teaching, tending to others in God's love, and the transformations that happens to us. So that maybe in this 40 to 45 days, as you say, you've done this. It only takes 27 days to build a habit. Maybe you are transformed enough that some of this will carry ahead.
The church where my wife and I worship, Union Presbyterian in Endicott, has a Lenten service every Wednesday evening in Lent of various musical styles. And then the Labyrinth will be out in the fellowship hall for people to walk. It'll be up all during the 40 days of Lent, which kind of crimps the style of the fellowship hall a little bit, but it's Lent. So I think each church will have various plans.
Absolutely.
Now that's the church, and as individuals, I think I told you on the phone when we talked about this that I remember the pastor saying once that giving up some things for Lent is one thing, but adding some things for Lent too that are helpful for you, or if you're going to give up some time, what will you do with it? And I remember the first year I tried this. I have a blog, and so I wrote about the 40 people, one a day, who had a spiritual influence on me as a child or as an adult. And then a couple of years later, I wrote about certain church experiences I had one a day. That discipline of writing was a wonderful way for me to think back, but also to say, how has this touched me? And now how might I be the same influence on others? Do you have a particular discipline that you adopt